Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Watchful Eye. Walter Ward arranged the chess pieces on the board with practiced precision, his fingers moving with the grace of someone who'd spent 20 years teaching the game. 8-year-old Isabella sat across from him in their living room, her dark eyes studying the board with the same intensity her mother once had. "Dad, you're distracted again," Isabella said, moving her knight. Walter smiled, but she was right. For 3 weeks now, he'd felt eyes on him. Different cars parked too long on their quiet suburban street. The same face at the grocery store twice in 1 week. Emmanuel Green, their neighbor, had become unusually protective, always seeming to materialize when Walter took Isabella to school or brought her home. "You're right, Bella. I'm sorry." Walter moved his bishop. "But look, you left your queen exposed." "Did I?" Isabella grinned, moving her rook. "Checkmate." Walter stared at the board. She'd baited him perfectly, sacrificing position to create a trap he'd walked right into. Pride swelled in his chest. Deborah would have been so proud. Deborah, 18 months since the accident. 18 months since his wife's car had gone off that bridge in the rain. 18 months of raising their daughter alone, teaching chess to neighborhood kids, and trying to ignore the gnawing suspicion that kept him awake at night. The police had called it an accident, brake failure in wet conditions. But Deborah Ward had been an investigative journalist, and she'd been working on something big. She'd been anxious those last few weeks, looking over her shoulder, making copies of files she kept in a safe deposit box that Walter hadn't been able to access without her key. "Mr. Ward," a voice called from the doorway. Emmanuel Green stood there, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, wearing his usual cardigan despite the warm evening. At 62, Emmanuel had the bearing of someone who'd seen things, done things. He'd moved in next door a year ago, a retired consultant, he'd said. He'd been kind to Isabella after Deborah died, often bringing them dinner, helping with yard work without being asked. "Emmanuel, come in. We just finished. Actually, Walter, could I borrow you for a moment?" "Outside." Emmanuel's gray eyes held something Walter couldn't quite read. Urgency. Fear. "Bella, why don't you get ready for bed? Brush your teeth." "Dad, it's only 8. Humor me. We'll read an extra chapter tonight." Isabella grumbled, but obeyed. Walter followed Emmanuel onto the front porch, where the older man stood rigid, his hands clenched. "Walter, I need you to trust me. I need you to listen very carefully and not react." Emmanuel's voice was barely above a whisper. "In about 6 minutes, you're going to grab Isabella, tell her you're going for ice cream, and walk toward Riverside Park. You're going to smile. You're going to act like everything is normal. You're not going to look at your windows or turn around." Walter's heart hammered. "What are you?" "There's no time. I'll meet you 2 blocks down. Pack nothing. Bring your phone and wallet." 6 minutes, Walter. If you love your daughter, trust me." The look in Emmanuel's eyes, steel wrapped in desperation, made the decision for him. Chapter 2. The Dead Woman's Evidence. 5 minutes later, Walter and Isabella walked down the sidewalk, her hand in his. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, and Walter forced a smile despite his racing pulse. "Where are we really going, Dad?" Isabella asked quietly. She was too smart. "On an adventure. Trust me." 2 blocks down, Emmanuel's car pulled alongside them, a dark sedan. "Get in. Back seat. Stay low." Walter pushed Isabella into the car and slid in beside her, ducking down. Emmanuel drove calmly, checking mirrors, taking random turns through residential streets. "Can I sit up now?" Isabella whispered. "Not yet, sweetheart," Walter said, his arm around her shoulders. 3 blocks away, the sound of gunshots cracked through the night. Isabella jerked, and Walter pulled her closer. "It's okay, Bella. We're safe. We're safe." Emmanuel kept driving, his jaw tight, until they reached an older apartment building on the east side. He parked in an underground garage and finally spoke. "They're gone now. You can sit up." Inside a modest apartment, Emmanuel locked 3 different locks and closed the blinds. Walter sat Isabella on the couch, her eyes wide with terror. "Mr. Green, what's happening?" she asked. "Your dad and I need to talk, Isabella. There's a bedroom through that door with books and a TV. Give us 10 minutes, okay?" When she was gone, Walter grabbed Emmanuel's arm. What the hell was in my house? Emmanuel pulled out his phone, showing grainy security footage. Two men entering through the back door. One Walter recognized for the grocery store, a tall Hispanic man with a neck tattoo. The other was stockier, carrying something. A gun with a suppressor. His name is Dominic Cervantes. The other is his associate. They were sent to kill you both. Make it look like a home invasion gone wrong. Walter's legs went weak. Who sent them? Curtis Carr. The name hit Walter like a fist to the gut. Curtis Carr, the real estate developer his wife had been investigating. The man who'd built his empire displacing low-income families, using shell companies to buy properties, inflate values, and sell to the city at enormous markups. Deborah had proof of fraud, proof of payoffs to city officials. She'd been days away from publishing when she died. My wife, Walter whispered. Deborah's accident. Wasn't an accident. I've been investigating Carr for 8 months. Walter. I'm not a retired consultant. I'm a retired intelligence analyst, and I've been tracking Curtis and his brother Simon Carr's operation. When I moved in next door, I didn't know who you were. Then I saw Deborah's picture in your house, and I remembered her name from the news. I started digging. Emmanuel pulled out a tablet, showing Walter files, bank records, communications, surveillance logs. Deborah got too close. They had a cop on their payroll, Detective George Bauer. He arranged her accident, cut her brake lines, waited for a rainy night. Carr thought it was over. But then you started asking questions 6 months ago, talking to Deborah's old colleagues. You made them nervous. Walter remembered. He'd contacted Caitlin Krause, one of Deborah's journalist friends, asking if Deborah had left any files with her. He'd been stonewalled, but he'd kept pushing. So they decided to eliminate loose ends. Walter said, his voice hollow. You and Isabella. Cervantes was paid $50,000. Bauer was going to rule it a burglary. Clean and simple. Emmanuel paused. I've been monitoring their communications. I knew tonight was the hit. I couldn't go to the police. Bauer would bury it. So I saved you instead. Walter looked toward the bedroom where his daughter was. 8 years old. She'd already lost her mother. Tonight, she'd nearly lost everything. What do we do now? We disappear or we fight, Emmanuel said. But if we fight, we need to be smart. Curtis Carr is connected. He has money, lawyers, politicians in his pocket. Going to the authorities could get us killed before we reach a courtroom. Walter thought of the chessboard. Sometimes you had to sacrifice pieces to win. Sometimes you had to think 10 moves ahead. We fight, Walter said, but we do it my way. Chapter 3, The Opening Move. The next morning, Walter stood in Emmanuel's apartment, his phone off, watching news on the television. A breaking story. Attempted burglary on Maple Street. Suspects fled the scene. Police Detective George Bauer appeared on screen, his jowled face serious, as he urged the homeowners to come forward. He's playing it careful, Emmanuel noted. He doesn't know if you're dead or alive. Cervantes must have reported back that you weren't home. Walter had spent the night thinking while Isabella finally slept. Chess had taught him that panic lost games. Strategy won them. He'd been reactive since Deborah died. Grieving, suspicious, but passive. That ended now. I need to understand the entire board, Walter said. Tell me everything about the Carrs. Over coffee, Emmanuel laid out. Curtis Carr, 52, was the public face, charming, philanthropic, photographed at charity events. His brother Simon Carr, 48, was the muscle, handling the dirty work. Together they'd built car development into a $100 million empire through fraud, intimidation, and strategic partnerships with corrupt officials. The real estate scheme Deborah uncovered was just one piece, Emmanuel explained. They've been laundering money through property deals for a drug distribution network. Simon runs that side. The families they displaced? Some fought back. Those people had accidents too. A warehouse fire that killed a family of 4. A witness who overdosed on drugs he'd never touched before. Evidence. Pieces. Fragments. Nothing that would stick in court without witness testimony, and everyone who could testify is dead or terrified. Emmanuel pulled up a photo of a middle-aged Asian woman. Except maybe one person. Roseanne Ward, your sister. She's an attorney in Chicago. She might be willing to help, but Walter, Bringing her in puts her at risk. She already knows something's wrong. I haven't answered her calls in 2 days. Walter ran his hands through his hair. We need leverage. Something that makes destroying us more dangerous than leaving us alone. What are you thinking? In chess, you create threats your opponent must respond to. Force them to make moves that expose their position. Walter stood, pacing. The cars think they're safe because they've eliminated threats. But what if we make them believe there's evidence that will come out if anything happens to us? A dead man's switch. You want to bluff? No. I want to build a real insurance policy, but let them think it's more than it is. Walter turned to Emmanuel. You said you've been monitoring their communications. Can you access them? I've got a contact who can get into their emails, texts. It's not exactly legal. Good? Because neither is murder. We're going to play their game, but we're going to be better at it. Over the next 3 days, Walter and Emmanuel built their strategy. Walter called Roseanne, his older sister, from a burner phone. She arrived in town that evening, her sharp features tight with worry. Jesus, Walter, you look like hell, Roseanne said, embracing him in the safe house. She bent down to Isabella. Hey, Bella. Long time no see. Aunt Rosie. Isabella hugged her. It was the first time she'd smiled since they fled. Once Isabella was occupied with a movie, Roseanne listened to the entire story, her lawyer's mind processing every detail. You need witness protection, federal marshals, which requires trusting a system that includes Detective Bauer and probably others, Walter said. We need to force the cars to expose themselves. Make them unravel. Ow! Walter spread out papers on the table, property records, financial documents Emmanuel had gathered, and a list of names. Curtis and Simon Carr have worked together for 20 years. But they're not equals. Simon handles the violence, the risk. Curtis enjoys the profits. That breeds resentment. You want to turn them against each other, Roseanne said. I want to create the conditions where they do it themselves. Curtis is paranoid about being connected to the violence. Simon is paranoid about not getting his fair share. We exploit that. Emmanuel added, I can plan emails from Simon to Curtis's business rivals. Make Curtis think Simon is trying to cut side deals. Then we plant evidence that Curtis is planning to pin everything on Simon if the heat gets too hot. That's manipulation, not evidence, Roseanne warned. Not yet, but manipulated people make mistakes, and mistakes create evidence. Walter looked at his sister. Deborah died, gathering evidence that would have been ignored. I'm not making that mistake. We're going to make them confess to their own crimes. Walter, this is dangerous. You're not trained for this. No, but I've spent 20 years teaching strategy. I know how to predict behavior, how to create pressure, how to force mistakes. Walter's voice hardened. They took Deborah. They tried to take Isabella. I'm going to take everything from them. Roseanne studied her younger brother. She'd never seen this look in his eyes, cold, calculated, resolved. Okay, I'm in, but we do this smart, and we keep Isabella safe. That's non-negotiable. Agreed. That night, Walter made the first move. Using Emmanuel's contacts, he sent an anonymous tip to Caitlin Krause, Deborah's journalist friend, a single document from Deborah's old investigation, along with a message. Deborah Ward was murdered for this. More to come if the truth doesn't. By morning, Caitlin had published a preliminary article asking questions about Deborah's death and the car development investigation she'd been pursuing. The article carefully avoided accusations, but noted the coincidental timing. Walter watched Curtis Carr's response on the news, a statement through lawyers denying any connection to Deborah Ward and expressing sympathy for the tragic accident. But Emmanuel intercepted the private messages between Curtis and Simon. Curtis to Simon, this is your fault. You said the journalist was handled. Simon to Curtis, she was. Someone else is pushing this. Maybe your husband. Curtis to Simon, find him, and make it quiet this time. Walter smiled grimly. The game was on, and the Carrs had just made their first mistake, revealing their guilt in writing. Chapter 4. Sacrificial Pawns. Detective George Bauer sat in his office at the precinct, his face flushed with anger as he read Caitlin Krause's article on his computer screen. The journalist was asking uncomfortable questions about Deborah Ward's death, questioning whether the brake failure had been properly investigated. His phone rang. Curtis Carr, private number. "We have a problem," Curtis said without preamble. "That journalist is sniffing around, and Walter Ward has disappeared with his daughter. I've got an APB out as potential burglary witnesses," Bauer said carefully. The precinct was full of cops who weren't dirty. But he's not using credit cards, not at his residence. If he's smart, he's gone aground. Then find someone smarter to locate him. I'm paying you too much for incompetence. The line went dead. Bauer stared at his phone, his gut churning. He'd gotten involved with the Carrs 5 years ago. Small favors at first, looking the other way on zoning inspections, delaying investigations into property complaints. The money had been good. Then it escalated. Deborah Ward's brake lines. The warehouse fire ruled accidental when it wasn't. He'd been in too deep to get out for 3 years now. But the Ward job was supposed to be the last. Except now the woman's husband was missing, and that journalist was stirring up old dirt. Meanwhile, across town, Simon Carr paced in his warehouse office, his phone pressed to his ear as Dominic Cervantes explained the situation. They weren't home. I waited 3 hours. Never showed. Where could they have gone? Neighbor's house was lit up. Old guy, military build. He walked out around the time they left. Could be connected. Simon's jaw tightened. Find out everything about the neighbor. If he helped them disappear, I want to know. But Simon had his own problems. That morning, he'd receive an anonymous email with a single sentence. "Curtis is planning to cut you out. Check his offshore accounts." The email included a link to what appeared to be banking records showing Curtis moving money to accounts Simon didn't know about. $3 million over 6 months. Simon had immediately called his accountant, who confirmed the accounts existed but couldn't explain why Simon wasn't listed. When Simon confronted Curtis by phone, his brother had laughed it off. "Obviously someone is trying to mess with us. Ignore it." But Simon hadn't ignored it. He'd started asking questions, making calls. And the more he dug, the more irregularities he found. Curtis had always kept the finances close, but this looked like systematic theft. The brothers Carr, partners for 2 decades, were beginning to doubt each other. In Emmanuel's safe house, Walter monitored all of this through intercepted communications. The fake banking documents had cost $5,000. Money Roseanne had fronted, but they'd been expertly crafted by Emmanuel's forger contact. "They're rattled," Emmanuel said, reviewing the messages. "Curtis knows someone's watching. Simon thinks Curtis is betraying him. But they're still looking for you." "Let them look," Walter said. "We need them distracted, paranoid. The more they focus on each other, the less attention they pay to their vulnerabilities." Isabella came out of the bedroom, her stuffed rabbit dragging behind her. "Dad, how much longer do we have to hide?" Walter knelt down, taking her small hands. "Not much longer, Bella. I promise. I miss home. I miss my room." "I know, sweetheart. But remember when I taught you about chess? Sometimes you have to move your king to safety before you can attack. Are we the king? Right now we are. But soon, we're going to be something else." That evening, Walter made his boldest move yet. He recorded a video, 5 minutes long, carefully scripted. In it, he sat in an anonymous room, his face clear, and spoke directly to the camera. "My name is Walter Ward. 18 months ago, my wife, investigative journalist Deborah Ward, died in what police called an accident. It wasn't. She was murdered by Curtis Carr and his associates because she uncovered evidence of fraud, corruption, and murder connected to Carr development. 3 days ago, hired killers entered my home to kill me and my 8-year-old daughter. We escaped. I'm recording this as insurance. If anything happens to me or my daughter, this video and all the evidence my wife gathered will be released to every media outlet and law enforcement agency in the country. Curtis Carr, Simon Carr, and Detective George Bauer of the Metro Police are responsible for at least 6 murders, including my wife's. They will answer for their crimes. This video is stored in multiple locations with instructions to release upon my death or disappearance. Leave us alone or face complete exposure. The choice is yours." Walter uploaded encrypted copies to secure servers with automated release triggers. Then he sent a link directly to Curtis Carr's private email with a message. "Back off, or everyone sees this." Within an hour, Curtis Carr was on the phone with Simon. This idiot thinks he can threaten us? Curtis snarled. He's got evidence. Deborah's evidence. This could bury us. Or he's bluffing. Probably has nothing and hopes we'll panic. He knows about Bauer. He knows about the other deaths. Curtis paused. Then we need that video destroyed and Ward silenced before he goes public for real. Bauer needs to find him. But Walter didn't intend to wait for them to find him. He was already moving to the next phase. Chapter 5. The Pressure Builds. Caitlin Krause sat in her newspaper office, reviewing the anonymous documents that kept arriving in her encrypted inbox. Each one added another piece to the puzzle Deborah Ward had started. Shell companies, fake property valuations, money transfers to offshore accounts, communications between Curtis Carr and city officials approving projects that should never have been approved. She'd been Deborah's friend. They'd started in journalism together, but Caitlin had chosen the safer path. Local news, human interest stories, occasional investigative pieces that didn't ruffle too many feathers. Deborah had been fearless, going after powerful people regardless of risk, and it had gotten her killed. Now someone was handing Caitlin the story of her career on a silver platter, and she suspected she knew who. Walter Ward. But she couldn't contact him, couldn't verify the sources. She could only publish what she could independently confirm. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Krause? My name is Roseanne Ward. I'm an attorney and Walter Ward's sister. I'd like to meet with you. Off the record. They met in a coffee shop an hour later. Roseanne was professional, direct, and clearly shaken underneath her composed exterior. Walter is alive, and so is his niece, Roseanne said quietly. They're in hiding because Curtis Carr sent killers to their home. I can't tell you where they are, but I can give you something. She slid a USB drive across the table. This contains evidence my sister-in-law gathered before her death. Bank records, communications, witness statements. It proves Curtis and Simon Carr have been running a criminal enterprise for years, and that they murdered at least 6 people who threatened to expose them, including Deborah Ward. Caitlin stared at the drive. Why are you giving this to me? Because the police are compromised. Because the Carrs have lawyers and money and connections. The only way to stop them is public exposure, so overwhelming they can't bury it. Roseanne's voice cracked. My brother is a chess teacher. He's brilliant and strategic, but he's not a fighter. He's using his mind to protect his daughter the only way he knows how, by making the Carrs more afraid of exposure than of him. But he needs someone to publish the truth. This could get me killed. It could. Or you could finish what Deborah started. Caitlin picked up the drive. She'd already decided. Give me 48 hours. While Caitlin worked, Walter executed the next phase. Emmanuel had been monitoring Detective Bauer's communications, and they discovered something useful. Bauer was skimming money from the Carrs. Not much, 50,000 here, 30,000 there, but it added up. More importantly, Bauer was documenting everything as his own insurance policy. He's smart, Emmanuel admitted. If the Carrs go down, he can claim he was gathering evidence. If they don't, he has leverage to keep his payments coming. Which means he's vulnerable, Walter said. He's corrupt, but not stupid. He knows Curtis would throw him under the bus to save himself. Walter had Emmanuel craft another email, this time to Bauer from an anonymous account. Detective, your partners are discussing eliminating you. Time to choose sides. Attached is what the Carrs are saying about you. The attachment contained fabricated text messages between Curtis and Simon discussing whether Bauer had become a liability they needed to handle. The messages were fake, but they matched the brothers' communication patterns perfectly. Bauer read them with growing horror. The messages discussed his skimming, his involvement in multiple crimes, and specifically mentioned that he knew too much. Curtis, Bauer's getting nervous. If he flips, we're done. Simon, so we handle it like the journalist. Make it look natural. Curtis, not yet, but have Cervantes ready. Bauer immediately increased his own security measures, started avoiding the Carrs' calls, and, most importantly, transferred all his evidence files to a secure location. Walter now had successfully isolated one of the 3 players from the others. Meanwhile, Simon Carr's paranoia about Curtis was reaching a breaking point. More evidence of financial discrepancies kept appearing. When Simon demanded access to all company accounts, Curtis refused, citing business structure and liability protection. "You don't trust me?" Simon asked during a tense meeting in Curtis's office. "I don't trust anyone right now. Someone's trying to destroy us, in case you haven't noticed. Maybe someone already inside is destroying us." Curtis slammed his hand on the desk. "Are you accusing me? I'm saying $3 million is missing, and you won't explain where it went. It's legitimate business expenses." "Bullshit." The argument escalated until Simon stormed out, telling Dominic Cervantes to start following Curtis and reporting back. Curtis, in turn, hired his own private security to watch Simon. The Carr brothers, unified for 20 years, were now actively spying on each other. Walter watched it unfold like a chess game reaching its critical phase. Pieces were positioned. Pressure was applied. Soon, someone would make a fatal mistake. "How long do we maintain this?" Emmanuel asked. "Until they crack." They will. It's human nature. When people are stressed and paranoid, they make emotional decisions. And emotional decisions create opportunities. That night, Isabella asked Walter, "Are the bad people going to find us?" "No, sweetheart. We're too smart for them." Mom was smart too. Walter hugged his daughter, fighting back the grief that still ambushed him. "Mom was very smart and brave, and she taught me to always think 3 moves ahead. That's what we're doing. What happens after 3 moves? We win, and we go home." Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. Curtis Carr paced his penthouse office, a glass of scotch in his hand, his usual composure cracking. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The journalist Krauss had published a damning expose. Not accusations, but questions, documents, connections that made people take notice. The FBI had issued a statement saying they were reviewing allegations related to Carr development. His phone rang. His lawyer. "Curtis, we need to talk. The feds are serious. They're issuing subpoenas." "Handle it. I can't handle federal charges of fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. If even half of what's in that article is true, it's all fabricated. Then we need to prove that, and fast. I also strongly advise you to stop all communications with your brother and Detective Bauer. Everything you say can be used against you." Curtis hung up and immediately called Simon, because he'd never been good at following advice. "We need to meet. In person. Bring Cervantes." They met at a warehouse Simon owned, a cavernous space filled with construction equipment. Curtis arrived with his private security, 2 ex-military contractors. The tension was immediate. "This has gone far enough," Curtis said. "We need to get ahead of this. Issue statements, cooperate with authorities, show we have nothing to hide." Simon laughed bitterly. "Cooperate? They'll bury us. You want to know what I think? I think you're planning to cut a deal. Blame everything on me and walk away clean." "That's insane." "Is it? You've been moving money. You've been having meetings with lawyers I don't know about. You're preparing to throw me to the wolves. You're paranoid, and you're a coward." Simon pulled out his phone. "I've got my own evidence, Curtis. Everything you've done. Every order you gave. If I go down, you're coming with me." Curtis's security detail tensed. "So did Dominic Cervantes," his hand moving toward his weapon. "Are you threatening me?" Curtis asked quietly. "I'm protecting myself. Something you taught me." The meeting ended in a standoff, both sides backing away with hands on weapons, neither willing to fire the first shot, but both knowing violence was now inevitable. What neither knew was that Emmanuel Green had been in that warehouse, hidden in the rafters with recording equipment, cameras, and directional microphones, capturing every word, every threat, every damning admission. When Emmanuel showed Walter the footage that night, Walter felt a grim satisfaction. "That's it. That's everything we need." "Not quite," Roseanne said. She'd been working her own angle, using her legal connections. "We have the Carrs threatening each other. We have evidence of fraud, but we need to connect them directly to the murders. We need Bauer's files, or we need one of them to confess." "Bauer's going to break," Emmanuel said. "He's terrified. He stopped answering the Carrs' calls. He knows they're going to kill him." "Then let's give him an escape route," Walter said. "One he can't refuse." The next morning, Detective Bauer received a package at his home. Inside was a burner phone and a note. "You're a dead man unless you make the right choice." Turn on the cars before they kill you. This phone is secure. Call the FBI field office and ask for Agent Patricia Lang. Tell her everything. Your evidence plus your testimony can save your life and put the cars away forever. You have 24 hours before your partners make their move on you. The note was accompanied by a photo taken that morning of Dominic Cervantes outside Bauer's house, clearly watching, waiting. Bauer's hands shook as he looked at the photo. It was real. Cervantes had been there. The cars were going to kill him. That evening, Bauer made the call. While Bauer was spilling everything to the FBI, Walter put the final piece in motion. He sent identical messages to both Curtis and Simon, appearing to come from Detective Bauer. I'm done protecting you. I've turned everything over to the FBI. Enjoy prison. Both brothers panicked. Curtis called his lawyer and started destroying documents. Simon called Cervantes and told him to grab whatever he could and run. It was over. And in their panic, both brothers sent explicit messages to each other, blaming, threatening, admitting guilt in their desperation to save themselves. Emmanuel captured all. Every message, every call, every moment of the car empire collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. It's beautiful, Emmanuel said, watching the digital evidence pour in. They're destroying themselves. Walter felt no joy, only cold satisfaction. They destroyed themselves the day they killed Deborah. We just gave them the rope. The FBI moved in at dawn. Coordinated raids on Curtis Carr's penthouse, Simon Carr's warehouse, and multiple car development properties. They arrested both brothers, Dominic Cervantes, and 3 other associates. Detective George Bauer was taken into protective custody as a cooperating witness. Caitlin Krause had the story of her career. She published the complete expose, including the video evidence, the recordings, the documents. It went national within hours. The chess game was over. Walter Ward had won. Chapter 7. The Pieces Fall. The FBI field office was a sterile place, all harsh fluorescent lights and bland government furniture. Walter sat in a conference room with Roseanne, Emmanuel, and Agent Patricia Lang, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s who'd led the investigation. Mr. Ward, I'll be honest with you, Agent Lang said. What you did was incredibly dangerous and arguably illegal. You manipulated evidence, fabricated communications, and orchestrated events that could have resulted in deaths. They tried to kill my daughter, Walter said flatly. I understand, which is why I'm willing to overlook the methods, given the results. Your evidence, combined with Detective Bauer's testimony and the recordings Mr. Green provided, has given us the strongest RICO case I've seen in 15 years. She slid a file across the table. Curtis and Simon Carr are being charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder, including your wife's, along with fraud, racketeering, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy charges. They're looking at life without parole. What about Cervantes? Emmanuel asked. Flipped. He's providing testimony against both cars in exchange for reduced charges. He'll still do 20 years minimum. Walter absorbed this. 6 murders. Deborah was one of 6. A family of 4 in the warehouse fire. A witness who'd been killed. All to protect a real estate scam. The banality of evil. Bauer? Roseanne asked. Cooperating witness. He'll serve time, probably 10 to 15 years, but he avoided the death penalty by giving us everything. Bank records, communications, his personal insurance files. He documented every crime the cars committed because he was too paranoid not to. Agent Lang leaned forward. Mr. Ward, you should know, the cars are attempting to claim they were manipulated into confessing by fabricated evidence. Their lawyers are arguing entrapment. Will it work? Walter asked. No, because the real evidence, the murders, the fraud, the actual crimes, that's all genuine. You didn't create their guilt. You just exposed it. The fabricated emails and banking documents were theater. The actual case is built on real crimes with real evidence. Walter felt the tension he'd carried for weeks finally begin to release. When can my daughter and I go home? Tonight if you want. The cars are in custody. Their organization is dismantled. We've arrested 12 associates, frozen all their accounts, and seized their properties. You're safe, Mr. Ward. But safety fell hollow. Deborah was still gone. Isabella had still lost her mother and spent weeks in hiding. Justice didn't undo the damage. As they left the FBI office, Emmanuel walked beside Walter. "You did it. Against all odds, you beat them." "We did it," Walter corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you. You saved our lives. I just wish I'd figured it out sooner, before they killed your wife. You couldn't have known, but you knew when it mattered." Walter stopped, facing Emmanuel. "Thank you. For everything." Emmanuel smiled, a rare expression. "Your wife's story deserved to be finished. I'm glad we could finish it." Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The trial of Curtis and Simon Carr became a media sensation. Caitlin Krause covered it extensively, winning a Pulitzer Prize for her investigative reporting. Walter attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Isabella beside him, wanting her to understand that justice, however delayed, eventually came. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Detective Bauer testified about the conspiracy, describing how he'd cut Deborah Ward's brake lines under Curtis's orders. Dominic Cervantes detailed the murder-for-hire operation, naming both brothers as his employers. The recordings Emmanuel had captured played in the courtroom, the brothers' own voices condemning them. Curtis Carr's defense was that he'd been a legitimate businessman whose brother had operated criminal enterprises without his knowledge. But the evidence destroyed that claim. Emails showing Curtis authorizing payments, ordering surveillance, and explicitly discussing handling problems. Simon Carr's defense was that Curtis had been a mastermind and he'd simply followed orders. But his own threatening messages to Curtis, his management of the violent operations, and Cervantes' testimony about taking orders directly from Simon demolished that argument. On the witness stand, Walter testified about Deborah's investigation, her suspicions in the weeks before her death, and the impact her murder had on their family. He kept his voice steady, factual, but when the prosecutor asked him to identify a photograph of Deborah, his composure cracked. "That's my wife," he said quietly. "That's Isabella's mother. She died trying to expose these men. She died for the truth." In the gallery, Isabella squeezed his hand when he returned to his seat. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. Curtis Carr showed no emotion. Simon Carr cursed and had to be restrained by bailiffs. Detective George Bauer, watching from his own trial in a different courtroom, reportedly wept when he heard the verdict. At sentencing, both brothers received life without the possibility of parole for the murders, with additional consecutive sentences for the other crimes. Detective Bauer received 18 years. Dominic Cervantes got 25 years despite his cooperation. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Caitlin Krause managed to get to Walter first. "Mr. Ward, how do you feel about the verdict?" "Relieved. My wife deserved justice. The other victims deserve justice. I'm grateful to everyone who made this possible. There's been speculation about your role in exposing the Carrs. Did you orchestrate their downfall?" Walter smiled slightly. "I'm a chess teacher, Miss Krause. I understand strategy. But the Carrs destroyed themselves. They chose to commit crimes, to murder innocent people, to value money over lives. They made those choices. I just made sure those choices had consequences. What's next for you and Isabella?" "We're going home. We're going to heal. And we're going to remember Deborah, not for how she died, but for why she lived. She fought for truth. That legacy matters more than anything else." As Walter walked away, Isabella at his side, Roseanne and Emmanuel flanking them, he felt something he hadn't felt in 18 months. Peace. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 6 months after the trial, Walter stood in his living room, arranging chess pieces on the board. The house had been thoroughly cleaned, repaired, and in some ways reclaimed. It no longer felt like a crime scene. It felt like home again. Isabella was at school, thriving despite everything. She'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, and slowly, she was processing what had happened. She still had nightmares sometimes, but they were becoming less frequent. Walter had started teaching chess again, this time at a community center that served underprivileged kids, many of whom had been displaced by the Carrs' real estate schemes. It felt right, helping the families his wife had tried to protect. Emmanuel had become a permanent fixture in their lives, no longer just a neighbor, but family. He'd officially retired, for real this time, and spent his days helping Isabella with homework, teaching her about computers, and occasionally beating Walter at chess. Roseanne visited monthly, always bringing gifts for Isabella and legal documents for Walter to review. The civil lawsuits against the Car Development Corporation were proceeding, with dozens of families seeking restitution. Roseanne was representing many of them pro bono. The car's assets are being liquidated, she told Walter during her latest visit. After legal fees and government seizures, the victims' fund should total around $40 million. It's not everything, but it's something. Deborah would have liked that, Walter said. Justice and restitution. She'd be proud of you. What you did took courage. It took desperation and luck. If Emmanuel hadn't been there. But he was. That matters too. Sometimes the right people appear at the right time. That evening, Walter sat with Isabella, teaching her an advanced chess strategy. She was getting good, her 8-year-old mind grasping concepts that took most people years to understand. Dad, why do the bad men want to hurt us? She asked suddenly. Walter had known this question would come. Because they did bad things and Mom found out. They were afraid she'd tell everyone, so they hurt her. Then they were afraid I'd tell everyone, so they tried to hurt us. But you did tell everyone. I did. And now they can never hurt anyone again. Is Mom watching us? From heaven. Walter didn't know if he believed in heaven, but he believed in legacy, in the impact one person could have. I think Mom lives on in us. In the things we do, the choices we make, the truth we tell. That's more powerful than any heaven. Isabella considered this. Then I want to be like Mom. I want to tell the truth, even when it's hard. That's good, Bella. But you also need to be smart about it. Think ahead, be strategic, protect yourself. Like chess. Exactly like chess. Later, after Isabella was asleep, Walter stood in his study, looking at a photograph of Deborah. She smiled at the camera, confident and alive, taken just weeks before her death. He'd avoided looking at it for months, the pain too sharp. Now he could face it. We got them, Deb, he whispered. They're in prison. Your work is finished. You can rest. He didn't believe in ghosts or signs, but as he turned away, a chess piece on his desk, the White Queen, fell over. Coincidence, certainly. Air current, vibration, random chance. But Walter smiled anyway. He'd learned over the past months that life was a game of incomplete information, where you made the best moves you could with what you knew, adapted to changing circumstances, and sometimes sacrificed pieces to protect what mattered most. He'd learned that love was the greatest motivator, that justice required patience and strategy, and that good people could do difficult things when they had no other choice. Most importantly, he'd learned that he was stronger than he'd thought. Not physically strong. He'd never be a fighter. But mentally, strategically, emotionally strong. Strong enough to protect his daughter. Strong enough to finish his wife's work. Strong enough to win. Emmanuel knocked on the door, entering with 2 cups of tea. Thought you might want some company. Always. They sat in comfortable silence. 2 men who'd become unlikely partners in an impossible situation and come through it intact. Do you regret any of it? Emmanuel asked. The manipulation, the fabrications, the risks. Walter considered the question honestly. No, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my wife died and my daughter lost her mother. But the choices I made to stop the cars? No regrets. They were monsters who needed to be caged, and we caged them. You caged them. I just helped. We did it together. That's what mattered. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, safe. Everything Walter had fought to protect. He thought about the journey, from that terrifying moment when Emmanuel warned him to flee, through weeks of planning and manipulation, to the final confrontation and victory. He thought about the chess game he'd played, moving pieces across a board much larger and more complex than anyone's set. He'd sacrificed position for time. He'd traded safety for justice. He'd risked everything for a chance at checkmate. And in the end, the king, himself and his daughter, remained standing while the enemy pieces had fallen. The game was over. The king had won. Epilogue. 3 years later, Isabella Ward, now 11, stood at a podium in her school auditorium, addressing an audience of parents, teachers, and students. "My mom was a journalist who believed in truth," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "She died because she was brave enough to expose bad people doing bad things. My dad taught me that when bad things happen, you don't give up. You think strategically. You protect what matters. You fight back intelligently." This essay is about courage, not the kind you see in movies, but the kind that happens in real life. The kind my mom showed. The kind my dad showed. The kind our neighbor Mr. Green showed. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they have to, not because they want to. Walter sat in the audience, tears in his eyes, as his daughter won first place in the state writing competition with an essay about resilience, justice, and family. Beside him, Emmanuel nudged his shoulder. "She's got her mother's courage and your strategic mind. That's a dangerous combination." "The world needs more dangerous combinations like that," Walter replied. As they left the auditorium, Isabella between them, holding her trophy and grinning, Walter felt complete. Not healed. Some wounds never fully heal, but whole. He'd kept his promise to Deborah. He'd protected their daughter. He'd finished her work. He'd won the game. And in the end, that was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. When Time Runs Out. Marcus Lloyd had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in private security had taught him to spot lies, detect threats, and trust his instincts. But as his 5-year-old son Tyler tugged at his shirt that Tuesday morning, something felt different, urgent in a way that made his blood run cold. "Daddy, we need to go right now," Tyler whispered, his small voice trembling. Marcus smiled, ruffling his son's dark hair. "Why, buddy?" He glanced toward the stairs where Tamara had disappeared just minutes ago, supposedly heading to her marketing job downtown. Tyler pointed upstairs, his blue eyes wide with fear. "We don't have much time left." "Time for what?" Marcus chuckled, but the humor died when he saw his son's expression, the same look Tyler got when thunder scared him at night. "Please, Daddy, we have to leave." Tyler grabbed his father's calloused hand with both of his small ones. Something primal stirred in Marcus's chest. His son wasn't playing games. Marcus scooped Tyler up, his military training kicking in as he moved toward the garage. But before they reached the door, he heard it, Tamara's voice drifting from their bedroom window above, followed by a deeper, unfamiliar male voice. "Told you leave for the gym at 9 every Tuesday. Your husband suspects anything." "Marcus? God, no. He's too busy with his security work to notice." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He set Tyler down gently, his hand steady despite the rage building inside him. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of trust, loyalty, and love, all shattered in 30 seconds of overheard conversation. Marcus looked down at his son, understanding flooding through him. Tyler had heard them before, had been listening, scared, not knowing what it meant, but knowing it was wrong. "Stay here, buddy," Marcus whispered, his voice deadly calm. He pulled out his phone, activating the recording app he used for client meetings. Old habits from his investigative days kicked in. Document everything, trust nothing. The voices continued, clearer now as he positioned himself below the window. "Eric, we can't keep doing this. If Marcus ever found out." "Found out what?" "That his perfect little wife needs a real man." The stranger's voice was mocking, cruel. "Besides, you said yourself he's never home. Always working, always traveling for those corporate clients." Marcus's jaw clenched. He recognized the type. Arrogant, entitled. The kind of man who took what wasn't his and justified it later. The kind Marcus had dealt with professionally many times, usually at the business end of a confrontation. "When will you tell him about us?" the man continued. I don't know. Maybe after the holidays. Tyler's so young, and Marcus will want custody. Let him try. I've got lawyers who eat guys like your husband for breakfast. Marcus almost laughed at that. If this Eric character knew what Marcus Lloyd was capable of, he wouldn't be so confident. But that was fine. Underestimation was a weapon Marcus knew how to use. He recorded 5 more minutes of conversation before the voices moved away from the window. Marcus waited, patient as a predator, until he heard Tamara's car start and drive away, heading not to work, but undoubtedly to continue her betrayal elsewhere. Tyler appeared at his side, still clutching his favorite toy truck. "Are you mad, Daddy?" Marcus knelt down, looking into his son's innocent eyes. The boy had tried to protect them both in the only way he knew how, by getting his father away from the house before the truth could destroy everything. "No, Tyler, I'm not mad at you." Marcus pulled his son close, his voice gentle despite the storm raging inside him. "You did good, buddy. You did real good." But as Marcus held his son, his mind was already working, planning, calculating. Tamara thought she knew her husband, the quiet security consultant who traveled for work and kept to himself. She had no idea she'd married a man who'd spent 5 years in Army Special Forces before transitioning to corporate security, a man who'd tracked down kidnappers, exposed industrial spies, and eliminated threats to his clients with surgical precision. She was about to learn that Marcus Lloyd was not a man who forgave betrayal, and neither was he a man who lost. Chapter 2: The Lion's Den. Marcus Lloyd hadn't always been a man who planned revenge with the precision of a military operation. Once, he'd been different, trusting, open, the kind of husband who brought flowers home for no reason and believed in second chances. That man had died in Afghanistan, buried under the weight of betrayal by his own unit commander who'd sold their position to the enemy for a briefcase full of cash. 7 good soldiers had died because of that betrayal. Marcus had been the only survivor, and he'd made sure the corrupt commander faced justice, the kind that didn't come from military tribunals. Now, as he sat in his home office with Tyler safely at his mother-in-law Nancy Sampson's house, Marcus studied the photographs spread across his desk. Professional surveillance wasn't difficult when you knew what you were doing, and Marcus had been doing it for 20 years. 3 days of following Tamara had painted a clear picture of her deception. Eric Waller, 38 years old, recently divorced, working as a fitness trainer at Elite Performance Gym. The same gym where Tamara had started her morning workouts 6 months ago. The same gym where she'd been meeting her lover every Tuesday and Thursday while Marcus traveled for work. But Eric Waller wasn't just any fitness trainer. Marcus's background check revealed a pattern. 3 previous affairs with married clients, all ending when the women left their husbands. Eric had a system, a predatory approach to wealthy, lonely wives. He was a professional homewrecker, and Tamara was just his latest conquest. The photographs told the story. Tamara entering Eric's apartment at 9:15 a.m., leaving at 11:30 a.m., both of them laughing like teenagers. The hotel receipts Marcus found in her purse. The Roosevelt downtown, always the same suite, paid for with the credit card she thought he didn't monitor. Text messages recovered from her laptop backup. "Can't wait to start our new life together," and "Marcus will never see it coming." That last message made Marcus smile, a cold, predatory expression that would have terrified anyone who saw it. His phone buzzed. A text from Tamara, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." The audacity of it impressed him. She was lying to his face while planning to destroy their family. All for a man who'd done this before and would undoubtedly do it again. Marcus opened his laptop and accessed the files he'd been building. Financial records, property deeds, investment accounts, custody law research, everything he'd need for what came next. But this wasn't going to be a simple divorce. This wasn't even going to be about money or custody. This was going to be about consequence. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 3 years. Caesar's Savage Investigations, came the gravelly voice. "Caesar, it's Marcus Lloyd." A pause. "Well, I'll be damned. Thought you'd gone completely legitimate. Marcus. What do you need?" "Background on a target. Deep background. The kind that finds things people want to stay hidden. Like the old days?" "Exactly like the old days." Caesar chuckled. "Send me what you have." "And Marcus? Good to have you back in the game." Marcus hung up and leaned back in his chair. Tamara and Eric thought they were playing house, planning their future while dismantling his family. They had no idea they'd just stepped into a spider's web that had been 20 years in the making. He thought about Tyler, about how his son had tried to warn him, tried to protect him in the only way a 5-year-old could understand. That boy deserved better than a mother who could lie to his face every morning and a stepfather who preyed on vulnerable women. Marcus opened his safe and removed a worn leather journal, his operational notebook from his active duty days. Some lessons were too important to forget, and some skills were too valuable to let rust. He had work to do. Chapter 3. The Web Begins. 1 week later, Marcus sat across from Caesar Savage in a dimly lit diner downtown, the kind of place where conversations disappeared into the ambient noise of clinking dishes and muffled conversations. Caesar slid a thick manila envelope across the table, his scarred face grim. "Your boy Eric has been busy," Caesar said, stirring sugar into his coffee. 3 divorces in 2 years, all following the same pattern. Targets married women with assets, breaks up the marriage, moves on when the money runs out. Marcus opened the envelope, scanning the surveillance photos and financial records. What about current assets? Living beyond his means. Gambling problem, specifically high-stakes poker games in the back room of Virgil Witt's establishment on 5th Street. Owes about 60 grand to some very unfriendly people. That was interesting. Marcus filed the information away and continued reading. Says here he's got a sister in Phoenix. Kendrell Waller. Runs a small accounting firm. Completely legitimate as far as I can tell. But here's the kicker. She's been sending Eric money for months. Thinks he's starting a legitimate business. Marcus smiled. Family was always a weakness, and honest family members were even better. What about his background? Military, criminal record, anything useful? Clean record, but I dug deeper. Turns out your wife isn't his first married target with a military husband. 2 years ago, he targeted Linda Everett, married to Colonel Jonathan Everett. That marriage ended badly. Jonathan caught them together and nearly killed Eric with his bare hands. Only reason Eric didn't press charges was because he was sleeping with a man's wife. Where's Colonel Everett now? Retired, living in Montana. Bitter as hell and drowning in bourbon, last I heard. Marcus committed the name to memory. A disgraced military officer with a personal vendetta against Eric could be useful leverage. There's more, Caesar continued. Eric's been telling your wife that he's got business connections, ways to make serious money. Promised her they'll be living in luxury once she divorces you. Problem is, the only business Eric knows is separating lonely wives from their assets. He's selling her a fantasy. Exactly. And she's buying every word. According to my sources, she's already been to a divorce lawyer, Wilson Little's firm downtown. High-end, expensive, the kind that specializes in taking wealthy husbands to the cleaners. Marcus's expression didn't change, but inside, ice-cold fury crystallized into something harder. Tamara wasn't just having an affair. She was actively planning to destroy him financially while playing the victim. I need you to keep watching them, Marcus said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. Full surveillance patterns, contacts, everything. And I need you to reach out to Colonel Everett. Discreetly. What are you planning, Marcus? Justice. Caesar studied his old friend's face and nodded slowly. He'd seen that expression before, in Afghanistan, right before Marcus had systematically dismantled the network of corruption that had gotten their unit ambushed. Methodical, patient, and absolutely ruthless. What about the boy? Tyler. For the first time, Marcus's expression softened. Tyler stays out of this. Whatever happens, he's protected. And if Tamara tries to use him as leverage? Marcus's eyes went cold again. She won't get the chance. After Caesar left, Marcus remained in the diner, planning his next moves. Phase 1 was information gathering, complete. Phase 2 was preparation, in progress. Phase 3 would be the trap itself. He thought about Tamara's lies, her casual betrayal, the way she kissed him goodbye each morning while planning his destruction. He thought about Eric's predatory smile and his assumption that Marcus was just another mark to be manipulated. Most of all, he thought about Tyler's small hand in his, the trust in his son's eyes when he tried to warn his father about the danger in their own home. Marcus Lloyd had been betrayed before, and he'd learned that mercy was just another word for weakness. Some people deserved second chances. Others deserved exactly what was coming to them. He pulled out his phone and typed a carefully crafted message to Tamara. "Missing you today. Can't wait to see you tonight. We should plan something special for this weekend. Just the three of us." Her response came immediately. "That sounds wonderful. Love you so much." Marcus deleted the conversation and smiled. The web was spinning, and soon, very soon, his prey would discover just how trapped they really were. Chapter 4. Pieces in Motion. 3 weeks into his surveillance operation, Marcus had established a routine that would have impressed his old Special Forces instructors. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he dropped Tyler off at Nancy Sampson's house, then positioned himself to observe Tamara's movements. She'd grown careless, confident in her deception, meeting Eric at various locations around the city. Today was different. Today, Marcus was going to introduce himself to Eric Waller. Elite Performance Gym occupied the first floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District. Marcus entered wearing workout clothes and a baseball cap, looking like any other middle-aged man trying to stay in shape. The gym was busy enough that one more face wouldn't stand out. Eric was exactly what Marcus had expected, tall, lean, with the kind of artificial confidence that came from preying on vulnerable women. He was currently training a blonde woman in her 40s, standing closer than necessary, his hand resting on her lower back as he corrected her form. Marcus approached the front desk where a young woman with tired eyes was working on a computer. "I'd like to inquire about personal training," Marcus said, flashing his most disarming smile. "Sure. What kind of training are you looking for?" "Something intensive. I travel a lot for work, need to stay sharp. I hear Eric Waller is good with military-style training." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly. "Eric is popular with certain clients. But if you're looking for military-style training, I'd recommend Scott Baxter. He's former Marine, really knows his stuff." "Interesting." Even the staff had reservations about Eric. "Thanks, but I specifically heard good things about Eric. Could I schedule a consultation?" 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself face-to-face with the man who was destroying his marriage. Eric had the kind of smile that probably worked on lonely housewives practiced predatory with dead eyes that didn't match the expression. "So Marcus, right? What are your fitness goals?" "Staying combat ready," Marcus replied, noting how Eric's posture shifted slightly at the military terminology. "I do corporate security, sometimes for high-risk clients. Need to be able to handle myself if things go sideways." "Corporate security? Huh? Must be interesting work. Good money in that field." There it was, the fishing for financial information that Caesar had warned him about. "It pays well enough. My wife doesn't have to work, we've got a nice house, can afford the luxuries." Eric's eyes lit up with interest. "Married, huh? Kids?" "One son, 5 years old. Great kid." Marcus watched Eric's reaction carefully. "My wife's been working out lately. Actually, says exercise helps with stress. I should probably ask where she goes. Might be nice to work out together." "Where does she go now?" "Someplace in this area, I think." "Tamara Lloyd?" "She's about 5'6", brown hair, drives a white BMW." For just a moment, Eric's practiced expression slipped. Marcus caught it. The recognition, the slight panic, the rapid calculation. Eric was realizing he was talking to the husband of his current target. "Doesn't ring a bell," Eric said smoothly, but his voice had changed. "A lot of clients come through here." Sure. "Well, anyway, when can we start training?" They scheduled sessions for the following week, and Marcus left with Eric's direct phone number and a clear understanding of his enemy. Eric was good at manipulation, but he wasn't particularly bright. The moment Marcus had mentioned Tamara's name, Eric had started planning how to use this coincidence to his advantage. That evening, Marcus sat in his office, reviewing the day's recordings. He'd worn a wire to the gym, an old habit that had served him well in corporate security. Eric's voice came through clearly as he called someone immediately after Marcus left. "Yeah, it's me. We got a problem. The husband showed up at the gym. No, he doesn't know anything, but this is getting too close. I think we need to move up the timeline." Marcus smiled and reached for his phone. Time to accelerate his own timeline. He dialed Caesar's number. "It's me. I need you to contact Colonel Everett tonight. Tell him I have a proposition that might interest him." "What kind of proposition?" "The kind that give him a chance to get even with Eric Waller. And I need you to reach out to Kendra Waller in Phoenix. Tell her someone's been using her brother's name in some questionable business deals around town." "Marcus, what are you planning?" "Eric wants to move fast. We'll give him fast. By the end of next week, he's going to wish he'd never heard the name Lloyd." After hanging up, Marcus walked to Tyler's room and found his son already asleep, clutching his toy truck. The boy looked peaceful, innocent, trusting that his father would protect him from the monsters in the world. Marcus had never failed to protect someone he loved. He wasn't about to start now. Chapter 5. The Squeeze. Colonel Jonathan Everett arrived in town on a Wednesday, driving a battered pickup truck and carrying himself with the rigid posture of a man who'd spent 30 years in the military. Marcus met him at the same diner where he'd briefed Caesar, observing the older man's weathered face and the pain that whiskey couldn't quite wash away. "You're Lloyd," Everett said, settling into the booth. "Savage says you've got Eric Waller in your crosshairs. He destroyed your marriage. Now he's working on mine." Everett's jaw tightened. "Linda and I had 22 years together. 2 decades of marriage, and that piece of garbage destroyed it in 3 months. She took half of everything and moved to California with him." "Where is she now?" "Vegas, last I heard. Cocktail waitress. Turns out Eric's promises were all lies. He dumped her the minute her divorce settlement ran out." Marcus slid a photograph across the table. Eric and Tamara entering the Roosevelt Hotel. "He's using the same playbook. My wife thinks he's going to marry her, set her up in luxury. She's already seen a divorce lawyer." Everett studied the photo, his hands shaking slightly. "What do you want from me?" "Eric owes money to some dangerous people. Gambling debts. I want you to help me make sure those debts come due all at once." "That's a dangerous game, Lloyd." "Colonel, I've done dangerous before. Question is, do you want to watch Eric Waller destroy another family? Or do you want to help me stop him?" Everett was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph. "What do you need?" Marcus outlined his plan, watching as understanding dawned in the older man's eyes. It was elegant in its simplicity. Use Eric's own weaknesses against him, create pressure from multiple directions, force him into making the kind of mistakes that would expose him to Tamara and destroy their relationship. "The poker game is tomorrow night," Marcus explained. "Caesar's contact says Eric will be there, probably trying to win enough to pay off his current debts. That's when you make your move. And if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, you were never here. You're just a bitter ex-husband who tracked down the man who ruined his life." Everett nodded slowly. "You know, Lloyd, 20 years ago, I would have called this plan immoral. Hell, I might have turned you in. And now I've learned that some people don't deserve mercy." Everett finished his coffee and stood. "I'll be at that poker game tomorrow night. And Lloyd, I hope your plan works, because if it doesn't, I might just handle Eric Waller the old-fashioned way." After Everett left, Marcus made his next call. Kendra Waller had agreed to meet with Caesar, concerned about reports that someone was using her brother's name fraudulently. She was flying in from Phoenix tomorrow, expecting to have lunch with Eric and straighten out what she assumed was a misunderstanding. Phase 3 was the phone call Marcus had been dreading. He dialed Tyler's school and requested a meeting with the principal and guidance counselor. Whatever happened in the next few days, Tyler was going to need support, and Marcus wanted to make sure his son had it. That evening, Tamara came home later than usual, claiming she'd been shopping with friends. She kissed Marcus hello, asked about his day, helped Tyler with his dinner, playing the role of devoted wife and mother with Oscar-worthy performance. "How was work today?" Marcus asked over dinner. "Oh, you know, the usual. Meetings, deadlines, office drama." She laughed, the sound hollow to Marcus's ears. "Sometimes I think about just quitting, maybe focusing on fitness training or something. I've been getting really into working out." "That's great, honey. Maybe I should meet your trainer sometime, get some tips." For just a moment, Tamara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh, I don't really have a specific trainer. I just use the machines, take some classes." Marcus nodded, filing away another lie. "Well, if you ever want a workout partner, let me know. I joined a new gym downtown. Elite Performance. Nice place." This time, Tamara's reaction was unmistakable, a sharp intake of breath, a flush of color in her cheeks. Never heard of it. Really? I could have sworn I saw a receipt from there in your purse last week. You went through my purse? Looking for a pen. Sorry, didn't mean to snoop. Marcus's voice was casual, conversational. Probably belonged to one of your friends. Tamara forced a smile, but Marcus could see the panic in her eyes. She was realizing that her carefully constructed lies were starting to unravel, and she didn't know how much her husband actually knew. Good. Panic made people make mistakes, and Marcus was counting on Tamara and Eric to make several very big mistakes in the next 48 hours. After dinner, while Tamara was giving Tyler a bath, Marcus received a text from an unknown number, ready for tomorrow night. This bastard owes more than money. J.E. Marcus deleted the message and smiled. All the pieces were moving into position. Tomorrow night, Eric Waller was going to discover that some debts couldn't be paid with money, and some enemies were more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. Chapter 6. The Walls Close In. The poker game at Virgil Witt's back room was already in full swing when Eric Waller arrived, carrying himself with the false confidence of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone else. The room was thick with cigar smoke and tension. 5 men around a green felt table with enough money in the center to buy a luxury car. Colonel Jonathan Everett sat in the corner, nursing a bourbon and watching Eric with the patience of a predator. He'd been waiting for this moment for 2 years, and tonight, Eric Waller was going to pay for what he'd done to Linda. Mind if I join? Eric asked, approaching the table with a stack of cash that represented his last desperate attempt to cover his mounting debts. Fresh money's always welcome, Virgil Witt said, his gravelly voice carrying the authority of a man who'd run illegal games for 20 years. But you know the rules, Eric. No credit, no IOUs. Cash only. Eric took his seat, confident in his ability to read people and exploit their weaknesses. What he didn't know was that 3 of the other players at the table were working with Marcus Lloyd, following a carefully orchestrated script designed to separate Eric from every dollar he had. For the first hour, Eric won steadily, his confidence growing with each successful bluff. But Marcus had studied Eric's playing style through weeks of surveillance, and the trap was designed to exploit the man's predictable patterns. By 11 p.m., Eric was down $12,000 and growing desperate. The other players could smell his panic, and like sharks sensing blood, they began to circle. Rough night, Eric, one of them said with false sympathy. Maybe you should call it quits. I'm fine, Eric snapped, loosening his tie. One good hand, and I'm back in it. That's when Colonel Everett made his move. He approached the table slowly, his military bearing impossible to miss. Eric Waller, Everett said, his voice carrying across the room. I've been looking for you. Eric looked up, and the color drained from his face. He recognized Everett immediately, the husband he'd destroyed, the man whose wife he'd stolen and discarded. I don't know what you want, but what I want, Everett said quietly, is for you to know that actions have consequences. You destroyed my marriage, took my wife, and left her broken in a Vegas gutter when her money ran out. The room had gone silent. Virgil Witt was watching with interest, and the other players were leaning back, sensing violence in the air. That's in the past, Eric stammered. Linda made her own choices. Linda made choices based on your lies. Just like you're lying to Tamara Lloyd right now. Eric's face went white. How do you know about? I know everything, Eric. I know about the gambling debts. I know about the promises you made to Tamara. I know about her husband, Marcus. Everett smiled coldly. You picked the wrong family to destroy this time. Before Eric could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his sister's name, and with everyone watching, he had no choice but to answer. Kendra, what's wrong? Eric, I'm at the airport. I flew in because someone called about you using my name in some kind of fraud scheme. What the hell is going on? Eric's hands began to shake. There's no fraud, Kendra. Someone's just confused. They had documentation, Eric. Bank records, hotel receipts, evidence that you've been running some kind of con game on married women. Please tell me this isn't true. The phone slipped from Eric's nerveless fingers. Around the poker table, 5 men watched as his world imploded in real time. Looks like your luck's run out, Virgil Witt said, standing up. And you still owe me 60 grand, plus tonight's losses. That's what, 75,000 total. I can get it. I just need time. Time's up, Eric. You know what happens to people who can't pay their debts. Colonel Everett picked up Eric's phone and ended the call with Kendra. You got a choice, son. You can face Virgil's people, or you can face Marcus Lloyd. Either way, your days of destroying families are over. Eric looked around the room, seeing his options disappear one by one. The poker players who'd taken his money were already leaving, and Virgil's associates were moving closer. What does Lloyd want? For you to disappear, Everett said simply. Leave town tonight. Don't contact Tamara again. Don't try to collect any money she owes you. Just vanish. And if I don't, Everett's smile was colder than Arctic wind. Then you'll discover that some husbands aren't as passive as you thought. Marcus Lloyd isn't the kind of man who forgives betrayal. Eric's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked down to see a photo of himself entering his apartment, taken just hours ago, with a simple message: we know where you live. We know where you work. We know everything. You have 12 hours. In that moment, Eric Waller realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He'd targeted a family protected by a man who played by rules Eric had never imagined. 12 hours to do what? Eric whispered. To be gone, Everett replied. Because if Marcus Lloyd has to come looking for you personally, gambling debts will be the least of your problems. Chapter 7. The Hunt Begins. Eric Waller's apartment was empty by dawn, but Marcus Lloyd was just getting started. Through his network of contacts and surveillance equipment, he tracked Eric's panicked movements throughout the night. The desperate phone calls, the hasty packing, the withdrawal of his remaining bank funds from 3 different ATMs. Eric had run, just as Marcus had predicted, but running only delayed the inevitable. Tamara discovered Eric's disappearance when she arrived at their usual meeting spot Thursday morning. The hotel desk clerk, prompted by a generous tip from Caesar Savage, informed her that Mr. Waller had checked out permanently and left no forwarding address. Marcus watched through Caesar's cameras as Tamara called Eric's phone repeatedly, her voice growing more frantic with each unanswered ring. By noon, she was crying in her car outside the elite performance gym, where a helpful receptionist confirmed that Eric had quit without notice and cleared out his locker. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with Eric merely leaving town. The man had made it personal when he'd targeted Marcus's family, and personal debts required personal payment. He's holed up at a motel outside Memphis, Caesar reported during their evening meeting. Paid cash, using a fake ID, but he's not very good at staying hidden. What about the sister? Kendra Waller flew back to Phoenix this morning, madder than hell. She cut off all contact with Eric and threatened to call the police if he tries to contact her again. Marcus nodded. Eric's support system was collapsing, just as planned. And the gambling debts. Virgil's people are actively hunting him. Word is Eric owes money to 3 different organizations now, and none of them are known for their patience. That was the beauty of Marcus's plan. He didn't need to destroy Eric directly. He'd simply created the conditions for Eric to destroy himself. The man was now running from multiple enemies, with no resources, no allies, and no way to earn legitimate money. I need you to make one more call, Marcus said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. Linda Everett in Vegas. Tell her that Eric Waller is broke, alone, and that the next woman he destroyed wants to have a conversation. Caesar raised an eyebrow. You think she'll cooperate? Eric left her with nothing, destroyed her marriage, and disappeared when her money ran out. She's got as much reason to hate him as anyone. That evening, Marcus returned home to find Tamara in their bedroom, crying over her phone. She'd spent the entire day trying to contact Eric, and the reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. Rough day, Marcus asked casually, setting down his briefcase. Tamara quickly wiped her eyes. Just tired. Work's been stressful. Maybe you should take some time off. You seem really run down lately. I'm fine, she said quickly. Just need a good night's sleep. Marcus nodded and kissed her forehead, playing the concerned husband perfectly. But inside, he was calculating her next moves. Tamara was trapped between her guilt over the affair and her growing desperation to contact Eric. Soon, very soon, she would make the mistake that would give Marcus everything he needed. 2 days later, his patience was rewarded. Tamara told Marcus she was visiting her mother, but Caesar's surveillance showed her driving to Wilson Little's law office downtown. She spent 2 hours inside, emerging with a thick packet of legal documents and the grim expression of a woman who'd just learned that divorcing Marcus Lloyd wouldn't be as profitable as she'd hoped. Marcus's financial preparations had been thorough. His assets were protected through a labyrinth of legal structures that would take years to untangle. His business interests were shielded by military-grade security protocols, and his evidence of Tamara's infidelity was so comprehensive that any court would award him full custody of Tyler. But Marcus wasn't planning to use the courts. He had something much more permanent in mind. That night, he called Colonel Everett with an update. Eric's getting desperate. He tried to contact Tamara through a mutual friend, but she's smart enough to know her phones are probably monitored. What's your next move? Eric's going to surface soon. Men like him can't stay hidden for long. They need to be the predator, not the prey. When he does, I'll be ready. And Tamara? Marcus's voice went cold. Tamara made her choice when she decided to destroy our family. She'll face the consequences of that choice. Everett was quiet for a moment. Marcus, be careful you don't become something you can't live with. Colonel, I became that something in Afghanistan when I learned that mercy is just another word for weakness. Some people deserve forgiveness. Others deserve exactly what they've earned. After hanging up, Marcus checked on Tyler, who was sleeping peacefully in his bed. His son would grow up knowing that his father was a man who protected his family, who didn't tolerate betrayal, who understood that some lines could never be uncrossed. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin the final phase of his plan. Eric Waller was about to learn that running wasn't enough, and Tamara Lloyd was about to discover that her husband wasn't the man she thought she'd married. The hunt was about to become a kill. Chapter 8. No Mercy. Linda Everett's call came at 3 a.m., her voice slurred with alcohol and rage. Eric had contacted her, desperate and broke, begging for money and a place to hide. Instead of hanging up, Linda had agreed to meet him, and she'd given Marcus the location. He thinks I still love him, Linda said, her laugh bitter. Thinks I'll help him because we were special. Stupid bastard doesn't realize he destroyed any love I had left. Marcus dressed quickly, leaving Tamara asleep in their bed. She'd been increasingly agitated over the past week, jumping at every phone ring, checking her messages obsessively. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how wrong things were about to get. The meeting location was a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the security cameras had been broken for years. Marcus arrived early, positioning himself where he could observe without being seen. Eric looked terrible, unshaven, wearing the same clothes for days, the cockiness replaced by the haunted expression of a man running from multiple enemies. He sat in a corner booth, constantly checking the entrance, his hands shaking as he sipped black coffee. Linda arrived exactly on time, but she wasn't alone. Colonel Everett followed her inside, and Marcus smiled as he recognized his third companion, Jesse Ramsey, one of Virgil Witt's enforcers. Eric's face went white when he saw them. He started to stand, but Jesse's hand on his shoulder pushed him back down. Going somewhere, Eric? Linda asked, sliding into the booth across from him. After you called for help. I thought we should have a family reunion. Linda, please, I know you're angry, but... Angry. Linda's voice carried across the diner. Angry doesn't begin to cover what I am, Eric. You destroyed my marriage, stole my money, and threw me away like garbage when I had nothing left to give. Colonel Everett took the seat next to Linda, his presence radiating menace. Turns out Linda and I have been talking, Eric, comparing notes about your methods, your lies, your promises. I never meant for things to go that way. Shut up, Jesse interrupted, his voice calm but dangerous. You owe Mr. Witt $75,000, plus interest, plus penalties for making him hunt you down. Call an even $100,000. Eric's hand was shaking violently now. I don't have that kind of money. I lost everything. Then you'd better find a way to get it, Jesse said. Because Mr. Witt's patience ran out 3 days ago. What about Tamara Lloyd? Linda asked suddenly. Still planning to run away with her money? Start a new life while she destroys her family. Eric's eyes darted around the diner, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. Tamara, she's not answering my calls. I think her husband might know. Her husband definitely knows, Colonel Everett said, and he's not the forgiving type. Marcus chose that moment to make his entrance, walking slowly across the diner with the predatory grace of a man who'd spent years hunting human prey. Eric's face went from white to gray as he recognized the husband he'd been betraying. Eric Waller, Marcus said, sliding into the booth next to Jesse. We need to talk. I don't know what you think you know, but... Marcus placed his phone on the table and pressed play. Eric's voice filled the air. Your husband suspects anything, followed by Tamara's response, and their entire conversation about destroying Marcus's family. 3 weeks of recordings, Marcus said quietly. Hotel receipts, bank records, photographs, testimony from witnesses. Would you like to hear more? Eric slumped in his seat, defeated. What do you want? I want you to understand something, Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd killed enemies with his bare hands. You targeted my family. You corrupted my wife. You made my 5-year-old son afraid in his own home. That's not a debt that can be paid with money. I'll leave town. I'll never contact Tamara again. I'll disappear. You already tried running, Eric. How did that work out for you? Jesse leaned forward. The debt to Mr. Witt still stands. $100,000 due immediately. But I don't have... Then you'd better call your lady friend, Linda interrupted. See if she's willing to pay for your mistakes. Marcus placed a second phone on the table. Eric's phone, which Caesar had retrieved from his abandoned apartment. Go ahead. Call Tamara. Tell her you need $100,000 to save your life. With trembling fingers, Eric dialed Tamara's number. Marcus watched his wife's contact information appear on the screen and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Tamara, Eric's voice cracked. It's me. I'm in trouble. I need money. A lot of money. Marcus couldn't hear Tamara's side of the conversation, but he could imagine her panic, her desperation, her growing realization that her fantasy romance was collapsing into nightmare. 100,000, Eric continued. I know it's a lot, but if I don't pay, they'll hurt me. The call ended abruptly. Eric stared at the phone, his last hope extinguished. She hung up, he whispered. Smart woman, Marcus said. Smarter than I gave her credit for. Jesse stood up. Well, this has been educational, but Mr. Witt wants his money. Since you can't pay. He cracked his knuckles meaningfully. Wait, Marcus said. I have a proposition. Chapter 9. The Price of Betrayal. The abandoned warehouse on the industrial side of town had once housed Marcus's corporate security training facility. Now it served a different purpose. A place where debts were settled and justice was administered without the interference of courts or lawyers. Eric Waller hung, suspended from a chain, conscious but wishing he wasn't. His face was a canvas of bruises, painted by Jesse Ramsey's methodical expertise over the past 6 hours. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological torture of watching his life's work. His careful manipulation of vulnerable women, documented and broadcast to every victim he'd ever targeted. The beautiful thing about the internet, Marcus said, adjusting the camera that was streaming Eric's confession live, is that nothing ever really disappears. Every woman you've destroyed will see this. Every husband you've cuckolded will know your face. You'll never be able to start over again. Eric tried to speak, but his broken jaw made coherent words impossible. Marcus had been very specific about which bones Jesse should break, enough to ensure permanent damage, not enough to risk death. Death would have been mercy, and Marcus Lloyd had no mercy left for men who betrayed trust. Tamara's watching too, Marcus continued, indicating a laptop screen that showed his wife's horrified face on a video call. Say hello to your future stepfather, honey. Tamara's voice came through the speakers, strangled with terror. Marcus, please, I can explain. Explain what? How you plan to divorce me and take half my assets. How you were going to let this piece of garbage help raise my son. How you lied to my face every day for 6 months while planning to destroy our family. I made a mistake. I was lonely. You were always working, and Eric said what you wanted to hear, Marcus interrupted. Just like he said to Linda Everett and Patricia Chun, and the 6 other women whose lives he destroyed. You weren't special, Tamara. You were just another mark. On the screen, Tamara was crying now, her perfectly applied makeup running down her cheeks. I'll do anything to fix this. Anything. Just please don't hurt him. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the warehouse walls. Hurt him? Tamara, I'm not going to hurt Eric. I'm going to let him live with the consequences of his choices. He nodded to Jesse, who produced a medical kit and began tending to Eric's wounds with professional efficiency. You see, Eric's going to survive this. His bones will heal mostly, but he'll never walk without a limp, never use his right hand properly, never seduce another woman with that pretty face. Eric's muffled screams filled the warehouse as Jesse went to work. And more importantly, Marcus continued, every law enforcement agency in 3 states now has copies of his confession, along with evidence of his fraud, extortion, and intimidation. Even if he could run, there's nowhere to go. Marcus, Tamara pleaded, what about Tyler? He needs his mother. Tyler needs a mother he can respect, Marcus said coldly. Not a woman who would destroy his family for a fantasy. You lost the right to call yourself his mother when you chose Eric over us. The video call ended abruptly as Tamara hung up, unable to watch anymore. But Marcus wasn't finished with her yet. Colonel Everett emerged from the shadows, carrying a thick legal folder. Divorce papers, he said, handing them to Marcus. Full custody to you, no alimony, no asset distribution. All she has to do is sign. And if she doesn't, then the video of her confessing to adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud goes public, along with her medical records showing she's been tested for sexually transmitted diseases 6 times in the past year. Marcus nodded. Tamara would sign. She was intelligent enough to recognize when she'd lost completely. Jesse finished his work and stepped back, admiring his craftsmanship. Eric was conscious, permanently damaged, and facing decades in prison. But he was alive, which was more mercy than he deserved. What happens now? Colonel Everett asked. Now Eric gets to experience the justice system he's been avoiding for years. Multiple charges, multiple states, multiple victims willing to testify. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison, assuming Virgil with people don't find him first. And Tamara? Marcus's expression was granite. Tamara gets to start over with nothing. No husband, no son, no money, no reputation. She wanted a new life so badly. Now she gets to build one from scratch. They left Eric hanging in the warehouse, with an anonymous tip already called in to the police. By the time law enforcement arrived, Marcus and his associates would be long gone, and Eric will be facing justice from a system that didn't tolerate men who preyed on families. 3 days later, Marcus sat in his lawyer's office as Tamara signed the divorce papers with shaking hands. She looked 10 years older, her confidence shattered, her future uncertain. I loved you, she whispered as she finished signing. No, Marcus replied. You loved the security I provided while you planned to betray me. There's a difference. She left without another word, walking out of Marcus's life forever. He felt nothing, no sadness, no regret, no second thoughts. She'd made her choice, and consequences were the price of betrayal. That evening, Marcus picked up Tyler from school and drove to their favorite ice cream shop. His son was quieter than usual, processing the changes in his young life with remarkable resilience. Daddy, Tyler said finally, is Mommy coming back? Marcus looked into his son's trusting eyes and chose his words carefully. No, buddy. Mommy made some bad choices, and now she has to live somewhere else. Are you sad? No, Tyler. I'm not sad, because I still have the most important thing in the world. I have you. Tyler smiled and returned to his ice cream, satisfied with his father's answer. He was too young to understand betrayal, manipulation, or the brutal arithmetic of revenge. But he was old enough to recognize love, protection, and the absolute certainty that his father would never abandon him. Marcus Lloyd had learned long ago that mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford. In Afghanistan, mercy had gotten good soldiers killed. In marriage, mercy would have meant accepting betrayal and teaching his son that weakness was acceptable. Some people deserved second chances. Others deserved exactly what they earned. As he watched Tyler laugh at something on his phone, Marcus felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Eric Waller would spend the rest of his life paying for his crimes. Tomorrow would build a new life